It's really 7 o'clock.
7:01.
Morning, good morning. Wow, Dr. Michelle, here, waiting for us.
My friends call me Michael, Sam.
All right, Michael.
Oh, I forgot to send you the shear. I'll send it to you later.
Please do. I see you tonight, Mitzvah Hashem?
What?
Coming tonight?
Mitzvah Hashem. If I get out, it's a big day in the office. We're switching
Yeah, you told me,
computers.
the whole
But
balagan.
but I hope to be there. At 8 o'clock I should be able to be there, I hope. But he gave a nice shear on Shia Chazarias. It's hard. Shia is hard. Very, very sort of confusing.
I listened to it on the way. I mean, it's good. I mean, I enjoy it. I listened to it again and
You mean
again.
Donnie Torrance, you talking
Yeah.
But you'll really enjoy this because he goes through every Maramukam that's in the Shias. He goes through every Maramukam systematically. It's been an hour and 20 minutes, but it's worth it.
Baron, how are you? Signal, the foreman. Na Mitzvah Kim Tzedek. Is Pesach machen wir etwas? Oder Fatih? Peiles? Wir verkaufen Peiles? Okay. Hallo. I don't care. I don't care. You think I care? Kijk me groen? Ik ben aan het chappen, ja. Eine darf chappen. Right? If you don't have a chappen yet, what's gonna be? Normale darf, ich weiß. Sie tun nicht normale Menschen. Das ist passive. Was ist das Siebe? Der Cash Register zu Geld oben in der Stuhl?
Man darf es einfach in der Store.
Ein normales Store?
Jede Woche.
For what?
Für Schabbeseiten, Blech.
Just to make sure that you know when you come back
Can I
and
make
business.
beads?
Ja.
No.
What's
They're
going
doing
on?
it?
What's going on?
Serious.
And
So
they're gonna do
busy
it?
with work.
Jede Woche, dann suchst du noch eine Woche.
Possible to get here.
Still waiting for
I
confirmation.
have to.
They make it work
I
without?
have to.
Whatever.
Right here, you
Listen,
know.
I'm
Maybe
not
it's
saying
in
it.
Florida.
But it's not my business. Du weißt das. Du einer was erzählt Fisch.
Work is just pressing.
Alcohol is a problem.
But finally I said
I don't know.
I
I'm asking you.
can't let work win,
Thursday.
Isaac. I
I
can't say I'm gonna let work win.
Couple of tits, is that
At this point I could retire it.
Sure.
And I just
So who's gonna
my
send
I
us
have friends
the
are
check?
retiring, a lot of my friends. Turning
That's
65, but why? Because I need to support
That's
kids.
not Geschäfte? You gonna cover itself?
I don't even know what Mimre's doing. I'm
Sag
sorry.
du teuer.
I don't even know what Mimer was doing. I didn't print them or nothing. Yeah. I can't even put into words how essential and helpful it is for me to be back here.
No, like more.
Eventually, you just have to see. You just can't let work win. You just can't let it win. No, really. I just said to myself, to my wife, I'm going to let them win. I can't do it. How's the Shabbos in YU?
Beautiful.
Yeah, very good.
Incredible.
Wow, there's a whole Hasidic movement there. I'm sure you heard about it. There's a lot of guys now that came. Yeah, it was Ramosha Weinberger from Towns. He's got a lot of from converts. Yeah. There's a lot of chevra there. So I'm sure he was very well received probably. That week, that Shabbos.
It was actually mostly the other boys.
Really?
Secular.
Really? Yeah.
This is a program for out of towners, out of the country.
Wow,
Out of that.
that's great. That's just wonderful.
And then the whole Medrash.
That's wonderful. It's beautiful. That's really wonderful.
Gave me Rabbi Soloveitchik's apartment. Where he used to stay.
On the first floor of the dormitory. So I'll tell you a funny story. There were a lot of, in why you had that branch, this is going back for 40, 50 years, they called something else that was called JSS, James Strier's. Probably sure when people came to YU without background. And they were very, very well meaning, of course. Very well meaning, but Morris Beston, or Rosh of stuff later, he was the head of the JSS, James Strier School. And a lot of the guys really didn't know very, very much. And the Rav had his ways. He used to fly in from Boston. And if he flew from Boston, his flight was ever late. And he came at 11 o'clock on a day that was laning. And he didn't get the laning was when he left Boston. So he would convene a chevra at 2 o'clock. And he would lane. He did his own stuff. So and he would come wandering out of his apartment when he wanted to have a mire. So he came out of his apartment one night, right into the dormitory. And there was a JSS boy standing there, who didn't know who the Rav was. And he said to him, can you bring some boys that like Daven Marav now? He says, we can't Daven Marav, it's too early. He says to the Rav, he says, no, I say it's okay. It's okay, you just get me some boys. But we can't, I'm learning now the Mishnah in Brachos. It's too early to Daven Marav. You can bring me some boys, I promise it'll be okay. He says, okay, sir, I will bring you the boys to Daven Marav, but you have to promise me that you'll say Shema later. So, there are a lot of stories like that. There are a lot of stories like that.
There was a story, a boy from Scranton.
Yeah.
That was the same type they described. So he asked the Charlie if he can walk his dog on Shabbos with a leash. And Rabbi Riskin said, go and ask if someone likes it. He goes to the dormitory, knocks on the door, and he opens up. He said, could I ask a question? Sure. He said, could I walk my dog on Shabbos with a leash? He says, I don't know. I guess he didn't want to ask him. So he said, what do you mean you don't know? He says, he's big rabbi and he doesn't know such a thing.
Yeah.
Morgenstern.
The one who gave me the apartment over there, he heads one of the programs. So he told me that once. So he was telling me, you're in Rabbi Soloveitchik's apartment where he stayed for
103.
many decades on the first floor over there,
Yeah, yeah,
the left door. Yeah, huh?
In Morgenstern.
Morgenstern, yeah. So he said that once, the boys are up at night, Bachrim, they're up till the wee hour sometimes. So he said it was once 2 a.m. and they were making a lot of noise. So he came upstairs and he sees the Chevra sitting, schmoozing, eating, whatever they were doing. He said, I don't understand you people. Don't you know that it's 2 o'clock in the morning and some people are trying to learn? Some people are trying to learn. It's 2 a.m.
Just when you walk into that building at night, you just have to be very, very careful to be quiet. You shouldn't wake up the security guard who's sleeping at the front entrance.
Shekayach Reb Nochem. Baruch Adonai Aleinu Melech Haolam Shekel Neh B'dvareh. Mach sich bequem. Okay. Okay. In focus today here, we're at the end of the Maimer on two pratim, 2 details. Not such details, but 2 nekudas, 2 points. First is the Svardim and the Ashkenazim that he mentions at the end. And the second is the Oiris and the Kalim, the Oiris of Toyu and the Kalim of Tikkun. So if you look, page 103, Nun Beis, column 2, 103, the last paragraph. Yeah. The Mamash 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I read it last week, but it was part of the bigger structure, so we didn't focus so much on it. I just want to point out a few inyanim here, a few points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines from the bottom. Nun Beis, column 2, or page 103. ולכן בתפילין של ראש, נחלקו הספרדים והאשכנזים, הם יברכו על הברכה מיוחדס, מפני שהמקיף דתפילין של ראש גבוה מאוד. על כן מנהג ספרד שלא לברך. דסבירה להו שאי אפשר להמשך המקיף ההוא. והאשכנזים סבירה להו דיכולים להמשך. He's talking about here the mouth, the power of dibur, of speech. In the writings of the Arizal, as he says earlier in Priyetz Chaim, it says that in a mitzvah there's two parts. There's the mitzvah and there's the bracha of the mitzvah. The mitzvah itself, as we know, is min ha-Torah, at least many mitzvahs. The bracha is not min ha-Torah. It doesn't say anywhere in Chumash to make a bracha. You have an exception. You have birchas ha-Torah, the blessing before learning Torah. Kishem Hashem ekra havu goydel elekeinu. And you have birchas hamazon, v'achalta v'savata uveirachta. But most of the blessings that we make for mitzvahs, besides learning Torah, is not min ha-Torah. It's midirabbanan. And the Chazal, Anshe Knesset HaGdolah, or sometimes later, were mistaken for different every mitzvah its own bracha. Tefillin has a bracha, laniach tefillin. Tzitzis has its own bracha. Food has its bracha. There's brachas ha-mitzvahs, there's brachas ha-nenen, there's brachas ha-idah. You put on a mezuzah, you make a bracha. Before b'dikas chametz, you make a bracha. Al bir chametz, before you eat matzah. You make a bracha al achilas matzah. Before you blow shofar, or you hear shofar, you make l'shma kol shofar. Before Megillah, al mikra Megillah. What's the concept of the bracha? So he said that the Arizal says in Eitz Chaim that the mitzvah generates the pnimi, and the bracha generates the makif. As he said, right before this argument, ki hevel apeh nasab chinas makif. The breath that comes from the mouth becomes an makif. So there's two elements in the mitzvah. There's the mitzvah and there's the bracha of the mitzvah. By the Sfardim and Ashkenazim, there's an interesting argument about tefillin. Do you make a bracha on tefillin that you put on the head? Everybody holds you make a bracha before you start putting on tefillin. The question is, it's not clear in the Gemara. The Gemara says that you make a bracha on Shal Rosh, but the argument is that you make a bracha on Shal Rosh only if you were mafsek. Meaning, let's say you spoke in between tefillin Shal Yan and tefillin Shal Rosh. So now the second mitzvah, the tefillin Shal Rosh, is a new performance because you made a hefsek. Even if you were supposed to make a hefsek, you had to make a hefsek. You're not supposed to. But let's say you, for whatever reason, you made a hefsek. I mean, you hear Shmei Rabba, Baruch, etc. Or for another reason, you made a hefsek. You interrupted the two through words. So then everyone holds you make a second bracha al mitzvahs tefillah. But what if you didn't make a hefsek? Do you make a second bracha? So this is a machlokes of the Sfardim and Ashkenazim, the way they interpret the Gemara, all the way down to the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. The Sfardim held you don't make a second bracha, you make one bracha. That's the minhag of all the Sfardim, and those who follow minhag Sfard do not make two brachas on tefillin, only one, unless they interrupt it. And the Ashkenazim hold not that way. You make a second bracha always on mitzvahs tefillin. As I mentioned, the Pais can bring, the Ramah brings that because the second shitta is so strong, the second shitta has a lot of powerful authority, so you should say Baruch Shem Kvod Malchus L'Olam Vod after the second blessing, because it's a chashash bracha levatal. So that's just to be machman according to the Sfardim. But the Ashkenazim shitta is that you make two separate brachas. At first glance, it looks like it's an argument how to teach a Gemara Pashat, a Menachos, how to teach a Gemara when you make the second bracha. And already the Rishonim argue how to learn the Gemara. It's not so clear. So it would seem like that it's more of a technical argument. How you touch a Gemara? This one has this. But like in all arguments, there's layers and layers of the depth. So here the Balatanya says something, that the Sfardim and Ashkenazim, it doesn't start with a technical disagreement about how to read the line. It comes from a much deeper place, and therefore they read the lines in the Gemara different. And it's true about all the arguments in Shas. You'll have Tanaim and Amirayim arguing. Do you say this logic or do you not say this logic? Do you learn it out from this pasuk or do you not learn it out from this pasuk? Do you darshan the extra hay or you don't darshan the extra hay? Yeah. Do you teach b'shach b'cha when you're going to sleep or b'shach b'cha when you're sleeping? B'komecha, etc. All these types of questions. So The other one couldn't understand the other perspective, they have to argue. The truth is that most of the arguments, or all of the arguments, they come from a deeper place. There's a certain mahalach, a certain perspective that a Tana had or an Amoira had. Yeah. B'meila, he saw it a certain way. This is, the Gemara often says, Lishitase, there was a shitta. And the shitta is not just a technical shitta. It's a shitta in many aspects of life. We spoke about this a few times. And that's why you could have a Tana Amoira argue about 50 different things, but they're all connected. Even though the issue is different, but the ideas, if you bring them back to their abstraction, if you remove them from their particular levush, from their particular incarnation, you go back to the Nekuda, you'll see that there's a mahalach, and that's why the Gemara is so makbid to always attribute a statement to its author, right? Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, v'itema, other people say it wasn't Rabbi Yirmiyah, it was a B'chia bar Rabba. And not only who said it, in whose name he said it. And sometimes there'll be an argument, right? 4 generations back, he said it in his name, in his name, in his name, but somebody says, no, he said it in this person's name. Yeah. Why is it so negeya? It's not just accuracy, that of course, but it's also whose school it comes from. Where does it come from? Whose mind it comes from? This is true about all machlokes in Shas, in Mishnayos, in Halacha, among Rishonim, among Achronim. In general, always, yeah. Yeah.
Integrity.
Yeah. And we all know this in our personal lives. When people argue about something, yeah, they're arguing about a technical thing, but they're never arguing about a technical thing. They're arguing if the window shades should be down or up, if the lights should be on or off, yeah, if we should use this room or that room, if we should go here or go there. And everyone has their reasons. Those reasons are the tip of the iceberg. And if you go back, you'll see that the reasons come from a much deeper reality, which helps because then you could see it from a more broad perspective and sometimes also grow and look at things from a different perspective. What's the Nekuda the Balatanya brings out here? That a bracha of a mitzvah has to do with an makiv versus an pnimi. What does this mean? There is the light that comes from the mitzvah that's called pnimi. That's the light, the energy that is internalized in the person. Whether the person is learning Torah or saying benching, or saying Shema, or giving tzedakah, or putting on a mezuzah, or lighting Shabbos candles, or listening to the shofar, or giving tzedakah to a poor person, or doing somebody a favor, or davening, or saying Kriya Shema, whatever it is, every mitzvah of the 630 mitzvahs, it brings a certain oid, a certain light into the world and into the person. The bracha that comes from your words, it doesn't have to do with action. And many mitzvahs are mitzvahs ma'asiyos. Yeah. Whether I'm eating a Shabbos meal, or I'm eating in a sukkah, I'm listening to the shofar, or I'm shaking a lulav, or I'm putting on tefillin. But the bracha is always dibur, words. That's how you say a bracha. And the bracha brings makif. Makif is always an that is transcendent. It's above pnimi. Pnimi means that which fits into the character of the person. It's internalized. That's why it's pnimi. Pnimi is the that goes into the pnimius of the keli. The keli is masim, is consistent with the makiv is the that transcends the vessel. Yeah. It's more superconscious or subconscious because it's not limited to the vessel of the person. It's higher. Makif. That's why it's called makif. Makif means it surrounds, above. But it doesn't mean physically in spatial terms that it surrounds above. It means that in Teichen, it transcends what the person could consciously be aware of. And the bracha is an invitation to that makif of the mitzvah. What's the connection to dibur? Why dibur? Why the bracha? He says, the Arizal says, hevel hapeh nasu b'chinas makif. The hevel hapeh. B'kitzer, we see that speech, words, have a power that is very powerful. And you'll see it, Balatanya says it in Torah, actually, Parshas B'Shalach. You see it, for example, somebody who's teaching. You could prepare a shir, we learned this also in the summer in the Maimon of Reb Hillel, you could be teaching, and you prepare the shir and you know it. This happens all the time to anybody who's involved in this type of work. While you're saying it, as you're saying it, somehow new ideas emerge that hours and hours of preparation, of thinking about it, of learning it, of harving in it, didn't give you. Somehow articulating it in words, even though you would think it's the last phase. This should not be the main thing. The words are just afterthought, and after understanding, and after experience, and after emotion, and after cognition, and after processing inside. Now you're just saying it. Dibur touches a place that is very deep in a person. Words, which is the real reason for this is, we learned then in the Maimer of Rabbi Hillel, no, it's Seifim Betchilasam, that Dibur, which is the first stage where it's going to somebody else outside of you, touches a place in you that you're unaware of. And it elicits a new force of energy or clarity or depth that you couldn't precipitate and have before on your own. This is just the koyach of Dibur. And you'll see, every person while they're teaching, not always, but very often, as you're saying it, there's a new insight, a whole new perspective, a whole new depth that you didn't even realize before.
Does somebody have to be listening when you say it?
Yeah, yeah. It's also true that when you say it to yourself, it's more powerful than when you think it to yourself. Right? Because when you're forced to articulate it, even to yourself, it's much more powerful. Like, sometimes you have to say something, yeah? Don't just think it, say it. Say it. Say it to yourself, and you'll see often you'll get stuck. It'll challenge you to make it clearer, because to get it from Machshava to Dibur is a very serious journey. It's a serious journey. It requires a lot of tzimtzum, requires a lot of articulation. So that's also true. And that's the first reason why Dibur has this power, because it articulates it. It forces you to structure it much more. Machshava is still elusive. You know, you could think, and everybody knows when you daydream, yeah? If anybody's daydreaming, you could testify right now. In 60 seconds, you could cover something that it takes 2 hours to say. Right? In your daydream, you could travel to Australia, you can come back, you can accomplish a lot of things. You can have 20 business meetings in your daydream of 1 minute. Now say it, oh, that takes a long time.
That's what real das is. No?
Huh?
Real das is sometimes you think you know until you
Yeah,
articulate it,
yeah.
it's not coming out.
Exactly. So Dibur challenges you in that sense, and therefore it elicits more clarity. It demands more clarity. Like, what are you really trying to say? The same is true with writing. People have, it's very interesting. You can have a gewaldic idea, write it down, and you'll see very often you have no idea. There's nothing here to write. Because writing demands from you a real clarity, similar to Dibur. You have to articulate it. There's a sentence. You have to read it. Like, what am I saying here? Am I saying something? Am I repeating myself? How do you say it? Why is this? This doesn't belong here. This belongs in the beginning. There's something, however, even deeper that happens when you speak to somebody else. That's much deeper. Here you have the element of no seifim betchilason, that by sharing it with somebody outside of you, not in you, you're not saying it to yourself, something gets touched in you that you couldn't have before that. Because saf kol sav, the deepest essence, comes out in the relationship with the other. And therefore, the Dibur brings forth a gush, a current, what's the word? A torrent, a flash flood, a flow of energy from within, in the same idea. That's much deeper. That's called Makif. So the Hevel HaDibur creates an it channels, it helps you tune in to an Makif of the mitzvah. Come the Ashkenazim and the Sfardim and they say, Tefillin shel yad, you can make a bracha. What about Tefillin shel rosh? Tefillin shel rosh, the Gemara says, its kedusha is greater than shel yad. That's why you change a shel yad to a shel rosh. You don't change shel rosh back to shel yad. You don't put, because Tefillin shel rosh is considered more holy than Tefillin shel yad. You first put on Tefillin shel yad, then you put on Tefillin shel rosh. Yeah. In the morning, it's brought in halacha. You say it's brought in Paiskim. Yotzer Or V'Orei Choshech. Many people by Yotzer Or, they kiss Tefillin shel yad. V'Orei Choshech, they kiss Tefillin shel rosh. Yotzer Or V'Orei Choshech. Now it's interesting. Light is higher than darkness. But here, the Tefillin shel yad is Or, and the Tefillin shel yad is Choshech. Tefillin shel rosh is Choshech. But the truth is, you can already see it in the words Yotzer Or V'Orei Choshech. Oir is associated with Yotzer, Yitzira, and Choshech is associated with Boire, with Bria. Bria is higher than Yitzira. The answer, of course, is that the darkness here is much higher than light. The reason it's dark is because it transcends the light and therefore it translates into darkness. It's like when the teacher is communicating a profound idea that is beyond your kalim, it translates as darkness, not because it's really dark, but because my vessels are too limited to appreciate it, so therefore I call it darkness. I'm in the dark. So sometimes I'm in the dark because there's no light. Sometimes I'm in the dark because there is so much light, and I can't grasp it. Sometimes somebody tells you more than your kalim can grasp, which may be the greatest favor for you. But it's called darkness because it's like I'm confused, I'm overwhelmed. What does it mean I'm overwhelmed? I don't have the kalim for this. I don't have a way to filter this and channel this into my identity. So Yotzer, Yitzira is light. Boire is much higher, much more subtle, much more divine, much more infinite, so to speak. It's Choshech. Try looking at the sun in the middle of the day. Look at the sun. What do they say? The light is blinding. Yeah, it's dangerous for the eyes. It's not good. Light is blinding? I don't understand. The point is, do not look at the sun directly, not because there's no light there, but because there's too much light for your retina, for your eyes to appreciate. On the contrary, Chalila, it can damage it. The light becomes blinding. The light translates into darkness to the point that you close your eyes. In other words, the light causes a certain choshech. I can't see this. It's too much. I turn away. Yotzer oir is tefillin shel yad. Boire choshech is tefillin shel rosh. It's much deeper. It's much higher. The question is, can you make a bracha on tefillin shel rosh? So he says, the Ashkenazim hold, the minik svard is, you can't be mamshech that makif. That makif, there's nothing for you to do. Let it be. It's a makif that your words cannot get in touch with. It's too profound. Whenever you could make a bracha, it means that somehow you can access the makif. The tefillin shel rosh is too of a deep makif for you to access. That's why you don't make a bracha. The Ashkenazim hold that you chaylim lahamshach. You could be at mamshach. It could be they're, of course, arguing also what type of makif it is. If it's a makif that my words can access on some level, or it's a makif that I can only be silent. The keli for it is inactivity, silence. At the end of the Maimon, the parenthesis, he says that's the difference of mitzvahs loisasa and mitzvahs aseh. Mitzvahs loisasa are considered deeper than mitzvahs aseh. Why? Because mitzvahs aseh you can do. Mitzvahs loisasa you can't do. You could just remain silent. And that silence touches a much deeper place than activity, action. Because there's two types of passivity. There's an inaction that comes from passivity, I just don't do anything. And then there's an inaction that comes from a recognition, an awe. From strength, yeah. Silence. Silence sometimes comes because I have nothing to say. And silence sometimes comes because there's so much to say. And words are going to ruin it. Or it's just, there's no room for words here. There's nothing to say. It's not that there's nothing to say. But all words are going to limit it, are going to filter it. That's mitzvahs loisas is deeper than mitzvahs aseh. Yeah. There's an expression the Gemara says in Brachas. Some of you just learned it. Tfilas arvis rishus. Machloikas if tfilas arvis chayva, tfilas arvis rishus. If ma'ariv is an obligation, or ma'ariv is voluntary. So we say the Lashon in the Rambam is ha'idna kavu chayva. Taisvus, the Rishonim say today already Jews accepted it as a chayva, but essentially the halacha is tfilas arvis rishus. Machlekes Rabbi Yeshua Ram Gamliel. Ram Gamliel holds tfilas arvis chayva. Yeshua holds tfilas arvis rishus, and because of this, Ram Gamliel was dethroned from his position. Brachas Chavzayim. Rabbi Yeshua says it's rishus, it's chayva. Balatanya says ma'ariv in a way is deeper than shachris and mincha. It's Yaakov Avinu, It's Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi. It's Boirei Choshech. Tfilas Arvis Chayva means if you're obligated, it means you can do it. Tfilas Arvis Rishus means it's voluntary. I can't obligate you. Because it's not something that I can put the responsibility on you to bring forth. Here again, on the surface, it looks like Maidiv is Rishus. If you want, yeah. If you want, not. On a deeper level, because it's beyond the capacity of a person to do. Here you see a pattern of Ashkenazim versus Sfardim. What's the pattern? When it comes to Makav, the Sfardim say, let the Makav be. Don't bring it. It's not for you to touch. The Ashkenazim say, no. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the Baal Tanya is not just saying something about the brachas of Tefillin Shanoy, she's also giving a certain perspective about the souls of Sfardim versus the souls of Ashkenazim. And I want to be this make because this confuses a lot of people. Everybody knows it comes Pesach, yeah? So some people who love rice for whatever reason, but they're crazy about rice, like I wish I was a Sfardi. If I was a Sfardi, then there would be no issue of kitnius, because kitnius, which means the prohibition on rice and other legumes similar to rice, happened in the Ashkenazi communities, more precisely in Germany, France, that area. In the Middle Ages, the 1000s or the 1100s, I think the first sources we know is Trumas Hadeshen, a little earlier, 1100s, 1200s, maybe early 1300s. And it didn't go. It wasn't in Spain, it wasn't in Portugal, it wasn't in any Sephardic communities. You know, so therefore the Sephardic Rabbanim never made this Gzeira, only Ashkenazim, and it's already a time after the Sanhedrin. So there's no Gzeira or Takana that applies to all of Klal Yisrael after the Sanhedrin is dissolved. It's not like the Takanas that were made in the Gemara or in the Mishnah that apply to everybody. There's no Jew who says Chanukah is not for me, Purim is not for me. But there are a lot of minhagim, L'chadoidi, right? L'chadoidi, Kabbalah Shabbos. Just giving an example, is a takana from the Arizal, from his Talmud, the Arizal. The yeshivas, they didn't do Kabbalah Shabbos, even though that's a phenomenon that Kabbalah Shabbos took over the whole Jewish world. But there's a few places where they don't do Kabbalah Shabbos; they go straight to Baruch Hu. Okay, it's not. It was a takana from later. Say that. So it looks like almost a technical thing that in Germany or France, the rice fields were right near the wheat fields. And they used to get mixed. It was a very noble takana. It made a lot of sense. The Sfardim didn't have it. Yeah, didn't have it. Yeah. The same is true with all the machlokes in Sfardim and Ashkenazim. You grow up here, you grow up here. But then the question really becomes, it's 1,000 years later, just because I have the mazel that my Zayda was a Sfardi, and your Zayda was an Ashkenazi, yeah. We're living in the same community, in the same neighborhood, in the same reality, so therefore, Atzoif Kol HaDoiros, this is the Inyan. So you could say, yeah, this is how it works. Al Pi Pnimius, it's not like that. It has to do with an neshama. It has to do with a soul. Yeah. That's what you see here. The Sfardim and Ashkenazim, and you could see it, b'muchash, that by the Sfardim, there's a certain Inyan of Makif that's more than by the Ashkenazim. The Ashkenazim were more vulnerable to enlightenment, to the logical structures of Europe, because their souls, what's the difference of Makif and Pnimi? Right? You know the difference of Sfardim and Ashkenazim. Yeah. Ashkenazim are very much, they like to understand things. For good and for bad. For good yeah. I went to a bris the other day of a Sfardish bris. Yeah. And I was thinking this would never happen at an Ashkenazi bris. Yeah. Now there's a bris, everybody's quiet, they wait for the baby comes in, kvate, moil, baruch haba, they finish, mazel tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, mazel tov. Yeah. So Sfardish bris, the baby came in, everybody sat down on the floor. Everybody was on the floor. They were screaming and hollering and crying and dancing and giggling. There was a certain freedom of uninhibitedness, expression. Ashkenazim have a very hard time with this. Go to an Ashkenazi shabris. Go to Ashkenazi shul versus a Sfardish shul. Yeah. So it's not just a culture thing. That's true. But it has to do, what's the difference of Makif and Pnimi? Makif is an that's above you. Pnimi is an that comes inside of you. Yeah. So Ashkenazim believe Yichaylim lahamshach. They want to have some control over the Makif too. They believe they could. They could make a bracha for Shoresh. The Sfardim did no bracha for Shoresh. Let the Makif be. It's completely above you. You see it in the concept of Emunah with Sfardim and Ashkenazim. What's Emunah? Emunah is a certain surrender to that which is transcendent. For Ashkenazim, it's difficult. It's at least more difficult.
We have to comprehend.
Comprehend and analyze and dissect very, very much. To the point of Meshigas. Sfardim, I don't mean to make generalization about every Ashkenazi, every Sfardi. And there's an inyan in this, there's a mile in this, there's a mile in this. So when it comes to halacha, the difference of Sfardim and Ashkenazim, it's not a technical thing. The technical thing is one layer of it. It's rooted in the shirish of the neshamas of how you relate to the energy of the world. And elu, there's the value in this, there's the truth in this, there's the truth in this. And here's a classic example for this. A bracha is makif. Tefillin shal yad is a lower makif. Tefillin shal rosh is a higher makif. The Sfardim say there's no way you could be at mamshech. Just put on the tefillin, do not make a bracha. It'll become part of the first bracha. And the Ashkenazim say, it's lechatchila. Again, if you made a hefsek, you have to make a bracha according to everybody. And the Ashkenazim say, yichaylam lahamshech. It's a type of makiv that they tuned into. It's obviously a machlokes what type of makiv it is. That itself is the argument. But they tuned into the makiv that we could somehow access.
When the Spartans don't make the bracha, they're not mamshech anything of the makiv?
They're not mamshech it. Of course it's there. Svin, of course.
No, because you're saying,
We're not racists here. We're not Ashkenazic racists here. The makif is, you can't be at mamshech. My words will only disturb it. They will encumber it. They will obstruct it. They will create a keli for that which is not a keli. Even in makif, there's different. There's a makif we learned in the Maimer and V'zeh Sabrach. Remember, there's makif ha'karev and makif ha'rochik, right? There's the makif of levushim. There's the makif of bias. A levush is also beyond you. My talus doesn't have to go into me, doesn't have to be exact measurement. It covers you, but it's still some relatable to your body. Certainly other garments. A bias, a house, yeah, it could be a big house. It's a completely different makif. In makif itself, there is makifim that are your own, and then there's makifim that are completely above. Like we all know, there's makifim, there's things that are very, very intense, but we have some inkling into it, and then there are makifim that are completely even beyond recognition. Like you may go your whole life and not know this part of you. There's parts of your to use psychological language, there's parts of your subconscious that somehow filter into your consciousness at some point or another, at least a glimmer of it. Both positive and not, both ways. But then there's parts of you that you're just, you're clueless. And it's maybe good that way, because it would be too much. There's certain things, your brain just closes the lid. This is not coming to the fore. It's a different level of makif. It's just a different level of makif. So this is the machlokes of Sfardim and Ashkenazim that he brings in.
So that's why Sfardim have more segulas.
There's
a lot of segulas that Ashkenazim don't even know.
Yeah, by Sfardim you see a lot of zgulas, you see a lot of brachas.
Maybe most have segulas.
Okay. In the Chanami, you see a lot of, by Sfardim, a lot of Amunas Tzadikim, right? You see by Sfardim very strong. Yeah. You saw by Sfardim also the Haskalah of Europe, the Enlightenment of Europe, didn't affect them the same way. Reform, conservative Judaism didn't hit the Sephardic communities. Why not? What's reform? Reform is we're going to reform Judaism. We're going to make it. We're going to make it beautiful. We're going to make it work. Yeah. Some of them had very good intentions. They felt in Germany of the 1800s, the first Reform rabbi was a man named Abraham Jacobson, the Zayda. They're just joking. Same last name. I think in Hamburg, he opened up in 1800 or 1808 the first Reform, what some Rabbanim called cathedral, yeah, with the organs and the choirs and the rabbis dressed like the galachim and the sermons, etc. Right? A lot of them had good intentions. They said, listen, there's a new generation. Napoleon destroyed the ghetto. We have to fit in. We want to be good Germans. Anti-Semitism will cease. You got to change things. You got to make Judaism that makes sense. It works. It fits into the culture. Take a Sephardi to a Reform synagogue. He'll run away. Maybe he won't do things on Shabbos that you have to do. But if you're taking me to a shul, take me to the real thing. Don't manipulate it. Huh? Yeah, not if you had a chinuch, I'm saying. But it was ground that was more fertile. It was more fertile for that type of change. Because it has to make sense. It has to be internalized, which has tremendous milas. You know, there's the Ashkenazic way of learning and the Sephardic way of learning. Also very interesting. Sometimes Ashkenazim will go into the world of pilpul in ways that Sephardim will not do it. Ashkenazim will make themselves crazy. Right? They'll analyze and dissect in ways that Sephardim often, it's a different... Nusach HaTfilah. Nusach HaTfilah is very different. So the Nusach HaTfilah, okay, so this is already on a much deeper level, but the changes of Nusach Sfard and Nusach Ashkenaz are all connected to the difference in the Zaydas HaMizrach, yeah. In Sfard Gufa, there's a lot of Nuschayas. Here he's bringing out one nekuda that you see about how they dealt with Makif. Fascinating nekuda. And because it's taka different neshama, so then sometimes you need a different avodah. It's not a bad or good. That's what we say. Elu ve'elu divrei. This is machlokes of Rishonim. It's not elu ve'elu divrei lekim chayim. There's a nekuda in emes in this and an emes in this. You go through all the argument between Sephardim and Ashkenazim. It does not begin with a technical thing. If they lived here, they lived there, and therefore this happened, and the rabbi decided to be machman, and here he decided to be mekel, and he decided to, because you get to eat rice for Pesach, you have to get up Rosh Chodesh Elul for slichas. You know, quid per quo. You can eat rice, but you can't sleep a whole Elul. We can't eat rice, but we could sleep till 2 days before Rosh Hashanah. As somebody once told me, he says he wishes he could swap. He would give up the rice, and he would love to sleep a whole Elul. Today, Baruch Hashem, there's quinoa, so the Ashkenazim have the cake and eat it too. For those who are matir quinoa. They make sushi with quinoa. Okay? So I'm telling you. They make sushi with quinoa on Pesach, so those who are matir quinoa, plenty of people are matir quinoa, so the Ashkenazim have the cake and eat it too, and don't do slichas in the month of Elul. We're getting away with murder again. The world of poetry by the Sephardim was incredibly more powerful than the Ashkenazim. If you study Spanish Jewry, yeah, most of its greatest poskim, a lot of them were also tremendous poets. And it's incredible to read their poetry. There's 3 books called Kol Shirei Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. Rabbi Yehuda Halevi was considered one of the Gdolei Hadar, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. He wrote the Sefer HaKuzari. And the poetry, never mind the Even Ezra and Reb Shlomo Ibn Gabirul, Reb Moshe Even Ezra. The Sephardim, they had this sense for poetry, and so again, you could say they were in Muslim country then, before the Christians took over, and the Muslims were much more cultured and much more developed, and they were into architecture and mathematics and philosophy, as the Rambam himself says, and the Rambam was influenced by it. Yeah, it's all true. They lived in, but all of this is part. It's not a mistake. It's all part of the providence of the journeys of their souls and the missions of their souls. I'll give one example that I heard once from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He said it in the name of Gdolei Yisrael. I think the Ostrovtzer Rebbe writes it, and it could be even earlier, but I think it comes from Rabbi Chiel Meir of Ostrovtzer, Meir Enei Chachamim. I think I saw it once. There was a Psarov in Varsha, I think Rav Feivelson also says it. The Rebbe said it over from previous Gedolim. Fascinating thing. Also very encouraging. He said that it's known by the Ashkenazim that Rabbeinu Gershom is called Ma'or HaGoyla, the light of the Golos, the light of the exile. Yeah. Why is he called Ma'or HaGoyla? Because he was the light of the exile. He lived in Mainz, in Germany, the 900s, the 1000s, and he was considered the Rosh HaPoiskim of Germany, so he's called Ma'or HaGoyla. But the question is, why did he get this title, the light of the exile? The Rashi didn't get the title. The Rambam didn't get the title. The Mechaber of Shulchan Aruch didn't get the title. Yeah. Rabbeinu Gershom was certainly big, but the title, the light of the Golos. So he said Rabbeinu Gershom made 2 takanas. two famous takanas, among others. One is, you can't divorce your wife, bal karcha. Halachically, you want to get divorced, you give a get. Kiddushin has to be midaita. She has to have consent. A get, you can give. You want, you don't want. Ben Gershom stopped that. There's no such a thing. You don't give her a divorce because you don't want. Because he felt that this is one of these halachas that could be misused. Just like with prusbul, right? Chazal understood the Torah spoke in a very idealistic fashion. A man doesn't get divorced unless it's... but Rabbeinu Gershom saw that people have moods, and men are men. I'm not going to elaborate at the moment. So he realized, you got to deal with them. You got to deal with them. This is an important distinction people don't realize. Torah speaks to a very often to a very idealistic person, a very idealistic situation. Just like prusbul. Comes Shemitah, you forgive your debts. And then Hillel says nobody's going to lend anybody money. Tikkun olam, etc. These types of things. So Rabbeinu Gershom said, there's no such a thing. Your wife has to agree. I don't want to be married anymore. I want to be free. Yeah, that's what men want. Guy comes to a Rav. He says, "Ich will a get. I want to get." He's screaming. Wer will nicht? You know the Chacham of the Manashtana. You discovered America. You think you're the only one who has an issue? So Ben Gershom said, "No way. She has to agree." There are situations where Bezdin can force him, force her. Situations where people are just behaving in a very destructive, abusive, dysfunctional way, and halach is going to intervene. Okay. That's one takana. Second takana Ben Gershom made, no polygamy. You can't marry more than one wife. Now, Torah allows polygamy, it never encourages it. Avram was hesitant to take a second wife. Yitzchak never took a second wife. Yaakov only took a second wife because he was deceived. Adam never took a second wife. It's not the path, but it's permitted. Polygamy is permitted. Ben Gershom prohibited it. Now, these were two important takanas of the Ashkenazim. He prohibited it for 1,000 years. He made the takana in 948. It ended in 1948, just for the record. Yeah, 1948. Yeah, the beginning of Even Ezer, the Poskim in the beginning of Ramon, the beginning of Even Ezer, 1,000 years not to marry two wives, ended in 1948 because he lived in the 10th century, 948. Of course, in 1948, the Ashkenazic rabbis agreed that it's a good idea to continue. Not everybody married two wives. So at first glance, it looks like, okay, it's takana, very important takanas. Rabbi Gershom understood if you can have shalom bayis with one wife, you're already ahead of the game. Let's not bring in a second wife to the house. Just figure it out with one wife and you'll do well. Right? Everybody knows there's people with one spouse, one husband, one wife, enough challenges. Another one to go to therapy, so you have 3 therapists for yourself and for each wife. It's hard. One wife is good, one husband is good enough for the wife, one wife is good enough for the husband. But the truth is there's a pnimius here. There's a much deeper layer to this psak. In the 900s, the persecutions of the Christians were becoming unbearable. And the Rebbe said the consciousness of the Jewish people was shattered to the point that the Christians would always say, God chose you and he abandoned you. This was one of the big things the Christians would say. God chose you and he abandoned you, threw you away. He divorced you. Look, you're the chosen people. Look who owns Europe. Look who could kill you whenever they want. The Pope owns Europe. Christianity then owned Europe. Therefore, it means that God chose you and then he rejected you. Why? Because you rejected him according to their story and he chose a new people. When Rabbeinu Gershom said you're not allowed to divorce your wife without her consent, it wasn't only a psak on earth. Like every halacha, it's a halacha in heaven as well. It's a truth of cosmology. No. God can't do it without our consent. We're the wife. We never agreed. Okay, so the Christian said one more thing. He took another wife. He didn't divorce you. He took another wife. Ada and Sila. He took his favorite wife. You could sit over there and weave sweaters and make cholent. And he took another wife. Rabbeinu Gershom said he can't take another wife. The psak of Rabbeinu Gershom wasn't just a psak in halacha. Rabbeinu Gershom was ma'oir hagoyla. He brought the light into Golus. He made the Jewish people understand that the relationship with Hashem is as powerful, as intact, as meaningful, and as real as it ever was. Even though there's darkness, Vanoichi has to ask her. Vanoichi asked her. They shouldn't think for a moment that the relationship is compromised even a bit. It's the same marriage, it's the same love. Zacharti la chesed nurayich avas kluloi sayich. It has not been diminished a bit, even if it's a challenging situation and many sometimes challenges that they don't understand. They shouldn't think there was a divorce or that there was a second marriage. Am zu yatzarti li teilasi yisaperu b'ni b'chori Yisrael ahavti eschem amar Hashem is unchangeable. The Hester Isaac. And it's true in everybody's personal life. Sometimes a person goes through different challenges. The worst thing is to think that you're abandoned. You were thrown away. You were cast away. All the Baal Shem Tov and all this Talmidim and all their Svarim, if there's one Nekuda, they don't stop with this Nekuda. This Rabbeinu Gershom gave the Jewish people Ma'or HaGeula. These two halachas weren't just technical halachas about marriage. That too, of course, important halachas, not to minimize the pshat. But it was also a light that he brought to the Jewish people. This is what's brought. So he said, what about the Sfardim? Sfardim never got this. So he said, by the Sfardim, they never had the Hava Minna that God abandoned them. Sfardim never had Hava Minna. And Taka, in those generations, you couldn't compare the persecutions of the Christians to the persecution of the Muslims. Now history has changed the other way. Right? Our problems come from the Islamists, fundamentalists, not from Christians. But then, in those generations, the Muslims, not all, but many of them were much more tolerant, much more accepting. It's the Christians that had this fanaticism, which produced the Rambam himself had to run away from Spain and so forth. So the Sephardic communities didn't have this level of persecution that caused within them this feeling of abandonment and neglect, and therefore they didn't need this takana. So this again has to do with different neshamas. Okay, we'll stop here. Continue. Tomorrow there'll be a shir mitzvah Hashem, same time. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Tomorrow night, Tuesday night. Yeah. Here, no, right here, 20. Chaim da ben Gershon. Was? Ja. Chaim da ben Gershon. You can't be gabbing the zwei Gemaras though.
Words take on
Their own identity.
On the negative side, somebody gets angry.
It's true. It's also true. You see it. It says in Reishis Chachma that when you get angry, you shouldn't speak. Why? Because by the words, you're going to say things, and sometimes the words can also increase the intensity of the emotion. When you're quiet, it's a big zgula to quiet things down. When people get into an argument and they answer, it elicits more anger from themselves. Very often. No, it is. It's a Boran Ranat, yeah. That the Dibur brings out deeper emotions. It's in the positive also. A person says, I love you, you articulate the emotion, it brings out deeper emotion. And the same is negative. When people are angry and they talk, it's like stalking the flames. It's pouring kerosene on the flames. You have to sometimes just turn away and be quiet. And it'll simmer in you, but it'll relax. You're not feeding the starter. You're not feeding the...